Hello and welcome. And today I'm joined by an executive coach specialising specifically in advancing women and career transition for STEM executives, emerging leaders, and female founders. I'd like to welcome to Reset Your Thinking podcast, Lia Zalums. Lia, it's a pleasure to have you here on Reset Your Thinking. How are you today?
Oh, Alex, hello, and what a treat, what an honour to have this conversation space with you today. And I'm so looking forward to where we go and just sort of where we go today. So thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
You're so welcome. I'm really excited for this episode today. So let's get into it, shall we?
Absolutely, far
Awesome.
away.
Fantastic. So let's start with a little bit about Leah.
Oh, which version would you like? How about the helicopter view of just sort of my background and where I've come from and where I am right now?
That would be terrific.
Yeah. So yes, I am Lia Zalums, and I started life in Adelaide in medical science, in biochemistry, because I was fascinated with how things work at the molecular level. And I was also very inspired to find a cure for heart disease because because a heart attack had taken my father out at a very young age, sudden death from heart attack. So that inspired me into science. So I wasn't one of these kids that knew exactly what I wanted to do. It was like I was good at lots of things. And the career advice at that time was, well, whatever you do, you'll be great at it. So off into science I went. I learned very quickly that test tubes were far too lonely for me, and it was actually human behavior and the science of human behavior and the science of why we do what we do, plus business, that actually were the two areas of my core passion. So that took me into a sales career. So I moved to Sydney and I spent most of my career in healthcare, preventative medicine, first in pharmaceuticals and then medical technologies and healthcare technologies, large enterprise system sales to improve the quality of human life and working with people. So the common thread was the science and the people, and that then took me through numerous iterations of that. And then a few years back in my mid-50s, I decided it was time for a career change because I wasn't seeing, I couldn't put my finger on it at the time, Alex, but when I look back now, I see that the corporate environment was not feeding me the nourishment I needed to become the best version of myself, to become as what I wanted to become and do what I wanted to do in the world. None of that was clear other than this inkling that there had to be something more and better. And that took me into coaching psychology masters, where we study the science behind why we do what we do, the science of goal setting, the science of motivation, and in the organizational leadership context. So that's where I brought my business background together, again, with that passion to understand why and how, and let's do it better. Let's do it better, would have to be my mantra. And so 5 years down the track, here we are. Fantastic. And in executive leadership, coaching and wanting to serve those people who have chosen to be in those corporate roles and government roles and institution roles, which are really important environments to that need to do well for the sake of humanity and our planet moving forward.
Absolutely. Lia, wow, thank you so much for sharing that beautiful story with us. And I really hear and heard the passion in you about the research that you wanted to do and I guess where it took you because of, I suppose, your personal connection to it. So thank you for sharing that with us. And I guess this has then taken you to doing some research. Even recently, I guess you've been doing some work with CEOs and leadership teams in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine. STEM is, I believe, what you call it. So tell us a little bit about, I guess, and I suppose you sort of covered it very briefly, about your purpose here, and was it all of what you shared with us what drove you to start the STEM research and leadership specifically?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And part of it is the logic sense it seems to make, where I have experienced those environments. So being male dominated environments, being, you think about STEM, you think about engineering, manufacturing, they're very male dominated and have been set up that way.
Yeah.
And similarly with academia, there's less than 1% of women are professors in engineering, for example.
Wow, that's very low, isn't it?
It's very, very low. So the
Yeah.
inequity, the gender imbalance is really, really out of whack. There's something like only 16% of the workforce in Australia is employed in STEM. And of that, it's even a much smaller percentage of those who are women who are in leadership roles. And then there's an economic study from PwC that shows if we were to increase the number of women or number of people in STEM jobs, then just a 1% increase would increase the GDP by $57 billion.
Wow.
57.
Right.
So there's a real economic driver.
Yes.
Just to get more people across the board into the data, the computer science, the data analytics, because we are very much in the era of technology driven data-based decision making. We don't have enough people who have those skills for those types of jobs. And when we look at like the world of AI and machine learning, which is all about reducing human error and producing better outcomes in whatever industry you apply it, right? We want better outcomes faster.
Yes.
If we don't have enough women in the mix, and not just women, but all representations of humans and at all different levels and roles in those data gathering environments that are producing the raw material to create the algorithm work for the geeky people to work with, we're just going to amplify and accelerate the same old. So the biases, the norms we have in today, these have not happened overnight. This is centuries of conditioning. Men built the business world, and studies are showing that women can be really good in the business world, but we don't have enough women leading businesses to make that right. So that's the crux of my mission, that if I can facilitate and potentiate more women to choose STEM, to choose leadership when they get to STEM, and then to be even more effective in their leadership roles, we can turn this around faster, because we're running out of time. The planet is running out of time. There's an urgency today that we didn't necessarily have or know about or, be so aware of 20 years ago.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Wow, you make so many critical points right there. And I think you've raised so many amazing facts, and it is really, really important, which takes me now to my next question, because I know too that you've conducted many interviews with women leaders within the STEM space. And I'm really curious, why choose these women specifically? Is this going to take us to the next step and help, and sort of assist and leverage what it is that your mission is about?
Yes, thank you for that, Alex. And this was a really intense piece of work I conducted last year over a
Right.
period of 6 months. And one of the reasons I looked into the what's going on in the mindset of women who are succeeding in various stages of their
Mm,
leadership career,
yeah.
in various types of roles in STEM, because often when people think STEM, they think techie geek,
Yeah.
or they think backroom laboratories, introvert nerds. And so part of it was to explore, is that true?
Right.
And are the same norms in place today that were there 30 years ago when I was in the lab, right?
Right. Hmm.
Um, and part of it was, no, there is a cohort of women who are choosing to stay, they're choosing to lead, and they're finding ways to thrive
Oh,
in
wow.
spite of the biases, barriers, and setbacks and challenges. So what's going on in their mindset was
Mm,
the driver. And
wow.
is there some way I can potentiate that, facilitate that, have a role to play in that? And if not directly with that cohort of women themselves, could that information be useful to someone else? Could that
Yeah.
information be useful to help someone who is 15, 16, 17, wanting to choose, do they go arts, do they go law, do they go medicine, do they go research? What could they do if they went the research path?
Yeah.
Majority
Yeah.
of these women have had very deep experiences in a particular field of research with their PhDs and so
Mm,
forth. So, because one of the other statistics that's important to note is that 1 in 20 scientists in their mid-career right now are going to quit. No, 1 in
right.
5, that's 20%. Yeah, 1 in 5. And this is current Australia-based research from May 2020. Now,
Mm,
that is a disaster for
yeah.
the leadership pipeline to come. And
Mm,
where are the role models for the young girls? They're going to look and they're going to see their mothers and sisters and friends quitting the industry that other people are encouraging them to go into. So, how do
mm,
we stop the rot? And one of
yeah.
the things that is a big driver is recognition of their work, Alex.
Absolutely. And, I love what you said there. And it would have been such interesting research that you would have, I suppose, got out of conducting these interviews. I would love to have been there and got into the mindsets of these women right along with you, because I think you make some great points here in that, well, firstly, why are they leaving? That's really key. And really, if we think about it from a holistic perspective, it really doesn't matter which space we're in. Our mindset is everything, right? And so it's really a structure that we go through, a systemization within our mind. And I'd be really interested to know even a little bit, if you're happy to share, Leah, I guess, with, has there been a common pattern that you found in their mindset around leadership, in their behavior, in their thinking?
Yes, really good question. Really, really good question, Alex. And that's one aspect that I did look at. Well, if we start off with how do we define leadership, just to sort of put it into
Yeah.
a container, and the definition I chose was around Brené Brown's recent definition that it's not about your role or about which chair you sit in or what office you have,
Yeah.
but it is about it's about the actions you take and the
Right.
actions you cause. So
Absolutely.
leadership is a verb.
Yeah.
And so this was really important, and that was the common characteristic, Alex. These women are incredible producers.
Right.
My goodness, they produce and produce, and they're not just acting for the sake of creating outcomes. They are very deliberate, they're
Mm.
very structured, as you say, and
Mm.
they're very task focused.
Right.
And you know what was, well, I'll come back to what was interesting about that, but the two qualities outstanding, just stand out 100%, all 24 women, was work ethic, their conscientiousness, right?
Mm.
Pedal to the metal, medal.
Right.
Yeah, whatever that saying is.
Yeah.
Many of them were family women as well.
Right.
Many of them, had enormous challenges with biases and racism and their own inadequacies and English language, and so there were one of the professors even has dyslexia.
Right.
And so don't tell me that, where there is a will, there's a way, when the mindset is right.
Totally.
So
Totally.
the conscientiousness and then the persistence.
Nice.
And what sits under the persistence, Alex, was their choice to see challenges as problems to solve.
Nice.
So I think the underlying sort of maybe innate trait below that was a love of problem solving. And
Yeah.
this is something you share too, that the more complex it is, the more you want to get into it.
Yeah.
And that's the trait, that's the standout trait.
Wow. What an
And
incredibly powerful environment.
yes. And I think too, their research skills was the other facet to them. So as I said, more than half of them have completed a PhD in their chosen field. So research were their prized possessions, and it really stood them out in terms of how they apply that in their commercial roles today, in their professorships, or their approach to how they teach and lead today. And that was something that I felt they took for granted, and that
Yes.
I was able to highlight the value, like to mirror back to them, hey, don't take this for granted. This is one of your superpowers. These are the things that differentiate you from someone perhaps without a PhD, or without that strong technical, like process-based, problem-solving based education.
Absolutely. And it's such an entrepreneurial mindset, really, because you mentioned the word problem solving. There's no barrier, there's no boundaries, there's no challenges. It's all about, well, how can we do it differently? What can we look at to maybe implement some other different system, other different structure, other different way of doing it? So they've been, and I'm saying they've, but the thing is, in that obviously their conditioning has been about always problem solving. So what is the end in mind, and working backwards to reverse engineer some form of structure, some form of, or some steps to be able to create a solution.
Yes.
And
to
that is
have
an
that
entrepreneurial mindset, isn't it, Leah? Because that's what you need. You need to be able to create something from nothing sometimes.
Well, that is another layer of insight right there, Alex, because I hadn't attached the qualities of an entrepreneur with the qualities of these highly educated, their achievements lists of published papers and patents, and there's lots of things they have achieved, because the bottom line is they expect their work to achieve something that's going to improve the way something is right now. This was particularly pertinent to the engineering cohort, and it gave me a really good insight into that value, the unique value of what an engineering background and education brings to that leadership table. Because I guess where we're leading with this is to tease out what are the specific superpowers specific to each of them, which I've highlighted in the research too, which is more about their personality trait superpower that I witnessed. But when we look at the way they think and the impact that's going to have in a leadership team, in a cabinet, in a government team, anywhere where big important decisions are made, there's there's a lack of, often a lack of the science-based, data-driven, evidence-based leaders in those rooms. And so this is where that aspect of what they bring to a leadership team. But yeah, and again, they don't necessarily see themselves as entrepreneurs.
No,
So
that's
that,
exactly
you know,
right.
and this is where we need diversity. This is why we all need each other.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. So, Leah, I'm really curious, you know, having done this incredible research and interviewing these successfully inspiring women leaders, what is, maybe I'll usually ask for three things, but what have you come away with? Is there maybe one thing that has perhaps stood out for you in terms of learning from interviewing these women?
That's a great question. And the one thing that stands out is that you've got to believe in your value.
Yeah.
You've got to believe that your project idea, your hypothesis, your thing has value. And that the time and the energy that you're putting into this matters.
Yeah.
And it may be a long sales cycle before the major breakthrough comes, right? So when you look at it, it's like a project, a business with a very long incubation period. But it is about backing yourself. And that's part of that journey. I also saw the value of those who had put themselves through a PhD, the value and of specific mentors in guiding them and being that mirror for them before, and seeing that potential in them before they saw it for themselves.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love what you said there. That's so powerful, because when we get, I guess, so involved and so stuck in the doing, in the whirlwind of it all, you know, when we're sort of, it's like that balcony saying, you know, often sometimes we do the same thing over and over. And you mentioned earlier how these amazing women, you know, they've got lists and lists and lists of qualities, and you saw that in them. And sometimes when we're in it, we can't see it. So having someone like yourself, myself, lots of people out there who do very similar things to be able to, and I love what you said, Leah, in that being the mirror for them, I think that's so key, because that then takes it to the next dimension, doesn't it? It helps them leverage, get to the next level with someone helping them see their true value. What a wonderful learning you've had and you've come away with. Thank you for sharing that with us.
And the other thing too, Alex, is that this cohort as an industry, they don't blow their own trumpet. Like getting up and like writing published papers and doing speaking, you know, taking speaking opportunities in that academic world. You know, a lot of them, you know, are or will write books and things, but somehow there's a, how do we shine the light more and better? And there are a lot of government initiatives now who, you know, to provide funding and grants to, and platforms are being made where women can, you know, register their credentials, and there's different leaders and different initiatives showcasing different scientists' work on LinkedIn. But it's kind of, there's a huge gap there where we're not influencing enough or inspiring enough young girls to choose science, and we're not stemming the tide of the middle layer leaving. So this is my quest to see, well, where can executive coaching perhaps come in and accelerate that process and add another level of development work that is not mentoring, right? What you and I do as executive coaches, part of it is mentoring, but what about that deep personal transformational leader development work that we bring? How much of that is going on at a qualified, at an effective level in STEM organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Some great questions raised right there. Important ones, Leah. Which brings me to my next question. And I know that you mentioned earlier about leadership and, Brene Brown and her beliefs and thoughts around leadership. But I'm really curious, and I'm sure that our audience and viewers are too, in that what is your take on leadership specifically? So what is it that you believe, and what does leadership mean to you, Lia Zalums?
Great question, Alex. And leadership, to me, it is about creating positive action, both in myself and in those I want to influence intentionally, and create an ongoing ripple effect to make positive change.
Beautiful.
And the other aspect that I was considering earlier was, do I associate good leadership with business success, right? Because if a business is successful, does that mean that the leader or the owner is automatically a good leader? And obviously in the business world, with all
great question.
It is a great question. It is a great question.
Yeah.
And this is where I think the world is telling us that's not the case necessarily.
Right.
But then we are seeing, a lot more corporate social responsibility. We're seeing the big leaders that have made a lot of big money, create different projects that enable and facilitate growth in other areas on a more humanistic level.
Yes.
But it is about the positive change, but it's about intentional influence.
Yes, I love that. Intentional influence. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that with us, Leah. And so what's been your experience in leadership? So I know that you've shared your journey, your professional journey with us thus far, but what's been your personal experience in leadership?
My personal experience in leadership has been in leading cross-functional business development and sales teams in the healthcare environment over very long sales cycles and very complex government-driven, tender-driven environments, as well as the more nimble, more corporate, quick, faster sales cycle environments.
Right.
And now in my own business, it's very much about leading myself and making decisions about where I spend my time and who am I trying to influence now.
Wow, that's so powerful. Questions that leaders must be asking themselves all the time, because let's face it, leadership is an inside job, right?
It starts as the inside job never finishes, Alex.
I know. Look at us, so many years down the track. And I think, I'll be 60, 70 and still.
But that is what inspires me. Like in my coaching psychology masters, the leaders in that field of psychology are in their 70s, and they've been at this for 30, 40, 50 years now, and they are more inspired today because there is so much more opportunity to get information out quickly, to be initiating projects globally. The internet has democratized business on many, many levels. And so how do we harness that? And to be able to bring what we know and what has changed us and package that in ways that makes it consumable and accessible by leaders and aspiring leaders around the world today. Because I know that if more leaders, whether they be in STEM or in other in any other industry experienced coaching with you, for instance, they would be starving for more. They would be wondering, how did I get this far without this? Right? But I think there's a couple of things there. That one is there is a lot of poor quality executive coaching and coaching across the board.
Yes.
And when people get burnt, they won't put themselves through that again.
No.
And we, again, one voice, where do we put our time best to serve who? And that's where I'm looking for that hinge to swing the biggest door, the heaviest door. And why leaders? Because leaders have that ambition and the vision to make positive change and to lead others and lead with others and through others. So if we can harness their power and empower them to be more effective with their communication, with their influence, then the impact of their work will be bigger and it will happen faster.
Absolutely. Hear, hear. I couldn't have said it any better myself. Absolutely. I love that. I love that. Leah, with all that you've shared right now, and with all the experience that you come with and the knowledge and the insights, what's been your biggest challenge as a leader?
My biggest challenge is intentional influence.
Right. Okay.
That is the honest truth, Alex.
That's cool. Okay, great.
Right?
Tell me more.
Tell me more. What I strive to initiate and amplify in others is exactly what I strive within myself each and every day. And
wow.
I have been like that all my life, but it's only with your question today that I've been able to articulate that. So I thank you for the journey that you've taken me on today and leading up to today, because this is what effective coaching is. We actually take a journey and we land in a better place, in a more empowered place, as a result of the dialogue, as a result of the connection, as a result of a structured approach. Like I don't want to use powerful questions per se, because that's bandied around, but they are very powerful questions that you asked, Alex. I want to give it to you because it's so true, but it's one of those things that gets bandied around, and it's only powerful because it's in context with who you and I are and what you and I are striving to achieve. That's what gives the question the power, not the words themselves.
That's exactly right. And you're so welcome. And I want to thank you for being so vulnerable and so honest and so raw here today. I think it's really important to bring all this stuff out to surface, because it adds value, doesn't it? It really adds value.
Well, I think this is also what differentiates coaches who have invested heavily in their own development. And I would never give even $1 to a coach that was not investing in their own development on a psycho-emotional level, as well as the actual professional skills of delivering coaching.
I couldn't agree with you more, to be honest. Absolutely. Absolutely.
There is no barrier to like the barrier to entry in coaching is non-existent. There is no bar. There's not one qualification that every coach has that creates some kind of standard. So I think that's why it's important when we have a platform like this, that we tell it how it is, but we share and we show our skills and our who we really are, because it's a very personal relationship and personal decision who you choose to work with, whether it be on your own professional development or the development for your teams and organizations.
Absolutely. Well said, Leah. Well said. Leah, I'm really curious, if I may. I know you've had, you've shared how involved you've been in the STEM culture. I'm really curious, how different do you believe, in your experience over the years, is STEM culture to other cultures? Or is there no difference at all? It's just the mindset again.
Well, culture is set by the leaders. The tone
Yes.
is set by the leaders. It's the responsibility of everybody in the system, but the tone, like the leader's shadow is bigger than others. I mean, people get paid more to be solving bigger, complex problems and having the responsibility of the outcomes of the business. So there's different levels of responsibility, and therefore there's the impact of the energy and the attitudes and the values, the beliefs of that leader is what sets the tone. And I wonder if the issues in STEM are not so much because of the nature of the work, but historically it has attracted, those industries have attracted more men than women. They've been male dominated from the beginning. But you look at, say, the hospital environment or the medicine environment, you pretty much got 50-50 women in terms of doctors in medicine. But that's maybe when you look at GPs, what's the ratio of specialists? I think you'll find that there'll be some specialties where there's more women than men, but there are inequities the higher you go up the tree. So I would say probably the common denominator is the male-dominated industry, as opposed to it being STEM specific, other than they are highly technical and they have historically attracted more men than women.
Wow. So thank you for that, Leah. So for the purposes of our listeners and our audience, then, if you could do one thing to improve the STEM leadership culture, what would that be?
One thing to improve the STEM leadership culture. I might be a little bit biased here in my response, Alex. But I would be looking very closely and carefully at the quality of professional development that's being delivered in those fields to both men and women. Both men and women. And there is a fabulous initiative and that has been put out that is the STEM, the New South Wales STEM decadal plan, or I might have that, it might be a federal initiative, but they've actually, and this has been under Lisa Harvey-Smith, who's the science ambassador, to provide guidelines of how to develop development programs that are measurable, that are professional, that are thorough. And so in that step towards improving the quality of professional development that's delivered.
Beautiful.
So because we've got to keep the ones that are in there and keep them growing and improving their effectiveness. And that also becomes a lighthouse for the women coming, the generations to come, to see I'm taken care of. My development is taken care of when I invest my time in this organization.
Beautiful, because let's face it, we all want to develop. It is a desire that each and every human has within. It's just being able to be given the ability and the chance. That's wonderful.
I would
Great answer.
But just before we leave that's from the organizational perspective. But I would say to each and every STEM mid-career individual, whether you aspire to leadership or not, whether you want more responsibility or not, be responsible for your own development and find ways to invest in your own development. Don't wait for your boss to pay for it, because we're not there yet. They're not investing in the same quality of development for that middle tier if they're still looking after their top performers at this stage.
Yes.
So
yes.
not
And missing
everybody
out on all the other
1%.
great performers that are still waiting to be, developed.
Yes.
Yes. Wonderful answer. Great answer. Love it. So here's one for you. If you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
Lead with inspiration and love where you're at.
I love that. Nice. Great billboard. I love it.
Yeah. And I use the word lead and I use the word inspiration because I believe if we believe we can lead, if we start to see ourselves, if more of us start to see ourselves as leading, we're going to start the process of thinking differently.
Absolutely.
We're going to start the process of making different choices. And that's why we have to see it in, we've got to give ourselves a chance.
We do. And not necessarily does it mean, I so love what you said there, Leah, because it doesn't necessarily, people have this belief that to have and implement and, show up as a leader means you've got to have the title as well. No, we don't need that title to be a leader. Everyone, like you just mentioned, can be a leader and bring those leadership qualities within themselves to then share and help develop everybody around them. Yeah.
And that's where some of the latest research is looking for those positive energy attractors in an organization. And it might be the janitor or the tea, well, there's no tea ladies anymore, is there? But, as you say, it might be the person who's the newest person in the organization.
Absolutely.
And don't we all love new energy in a group, right?
Absolutely.
And, but yes, this idea of situational leadership, the idea of leadership by example are very, very strong foundational pieces in the work that I do, because I truly believe that everyone is a leader of themselves, and with the right skills we can lead ourselves in any position in the organization. We've got to feed ourselves before we can feed others. We've got to believe in our own potential, because there's not always someone there to mirror that back to you until you start walking that path and showing up. And that's another thing I think that is that requires more attention and more help, is helping the women in STEM show up in ways that shows them as leaders and not just as scientists or not just as great technicians, but what about the impact they're having through their leadership behaviors, through their leadership mindset? That, I think, is another gap that would really accelerate the whole Women in Leadership in STEM project.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. Leah, you've been incredible. You've been absolutely a wealth of information, and I've really enjoyed chatting with you here today. And I just want to say thank you for your time today. And what support and resources are available if people, our audiences, our viewers, if they want to get in touch with you, what support and resources are available to them?
I definitely connect with me on LinkedIn, because I post regularly there, and I also have a newsletter that we can put the link in the notes, but I put out weekly free content, and it's leadership mindset tips weekly.
Nice.
I also have Z-Axis TV YouTube channel where actually each of the 24 women I interviewed, the full interviews are there.
Mm-hmm.
And it also has free resources on different psychology tools and aspects of leadership development that I do, again, so that people can get as a taste of how I work and what my style is, because it's definitely as much a style choice as it is a information-based choice as to who you work with. But
Absolutely.
you know, again, it's, and where do you go for information? I do my best to put quality information out there, and then I do have a self-development course, Unlock Your Superpowers, which again, through my newsletter, you can have access to that as well for those who want to learn more about turning your strengths into superpowers and actioning all this great learning that we invest in.
Wonderful. Wow. Sounds fantastic, Leah. And thank you so very much for your time today, for coming on to Reset Your Thinking podcast and sharing with us your insights, your knowledge, your expertise, all on women in leadership, and all of what you said, all of those links I will also pop on the podcast channel that will be advertising or sharing this this episode on today. So thank you again for your time, and thank you for being here and for taking the time to share all of what you've shared.
Thank you so much, Alex. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me on.
You're so very welcome. And thank you too to our listeners and our viewers here on Reset Your Thinking podcast. And if you'd like to make contact with Leah, make sure you visit our website, anchor.fm/reset your thinking, where you can access Leah's details, and you can also access anything, all the stuff that Leah's mentioned, and subscribe to our show in future. So thank you again, Leah.
Thanks, Alex.
Okay.